Hey everyone, so this is lesson 1 of Code Club, and we're going to make a game of catch, and we're going to use Felix the cat and Herbert the mouse, and you're going to control Herbert with the mouse and try to avoid getting caught by Felix. The longer you avoid him, the more points you'll score, but if you get caught, your score will go down. So how do we make this computer program starting from scratch? Well, we need a new project, so once you've logged into Scratch, and remember, that's scratch.mit.edu. You go to the website, log in, and then create a new project. And then once you're there, you can click on the stage next to the sprite and switch your backdrop. So that's the first step. We need a new backdrop. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to choose a backdrop from our library. And we're going to try and find the indoors hall backdrop. So this one. Okay, so we're going to load that up. And when it loads, there we go. Now we want to change the name of our sprite. So once this is saved. So we have our sprite. And this is Felix. So we need to give him that name. You can call him whatever you want. I'm going to call him Felix. So there we go. Renamed. Now, we also need to make sure that Felix only moves left and right. We don't want him spinning around on the spot or doing anything crazy. So we're going to click the little arrow icon here, double-headed arrow, and that will stop him spinning around. So, first steps. We need to get Felix to follow our mouse pointer. So, selecting our sprite, we've got him selected here. We can go up to the scripts tab, and we can start adding our code. So as you saw in that first video we had where we explored all around Scratch and the kind of blocks that you had available to you, you can see that the first one you'll need is the when green flag clicked. And because we're always going to want to keep Felix moving, we want to make sure that we have a loop in there that never ends. So if we look at our control area, we can find the forever block. So if you clip that on there to your start block, then you're going to have a loop that goes on and on and on. But inside that loop, we need to move Felix. Now we could move him in steps in a particular direction we wanted, but we specifically want him to move towards the mouse pointer. So if we go up to the motion section, we should be able to find something that moves him towards the mouse pointer. Well, if we use point towards, we can guarantee that he's always going to be pointing in the right direction of the mouse pointer. And the little drop down arrow here allows us to pick mouse pointer. So that'll mean he always points towards. Now if we stop at this point and run this program, you'll find that the sprite, as we move the mouse over him, points towards. Brilliant. It's exactly what we want, and we can stop that. But what we need to do is have him move. So he's pointing in the right direction. So now if we have him moving 10 steps, he'll always point in the right direction, and he'll always continue to move 10 steps towards. So if we run that, there we go. He's constantly moving after our mouse pointer. Brilliant. Perfect. Let's stop you there, Felix. Drag you back into the middle. Okay. So we've got him moving towards it. What else can we do? Well, we can make him look like he's walking. That'd be a good start. Add a bit of animation to our program. Now we can do this with the costumes tab. Now you'll note that we have 2 costumes here. And these are the default costumes you get for your sprite. So you shouldn't need to load these in, but they should be available should you need to. And you can see they're slightly different. If we flick between, you can see it looks like he's moving. A little bit of animation. Very basic, but that's all we need. So what we need to do is we need to tell our computer program for our sprite to change costume and continually change costume as well. So if we go up to the looks section, we can find the next costume block. Stick that in there, and that will mean that not only will he point towards the mouse, not only will he move in that direction, but he will also look like he's walking. So if we play that program, you can see, oh, look at that. He's super fast walking, mind. Super, super fast walking. Now, you'll find on the laptop or PC or Mac or whatever it is you're using to write these programs, you might find that he walks a lot slower than that. And that'll depend really on how fast your computer is. And you can do things to slow it down if you want. So if you think he's going too fast, you can add in some control to slow that down. Now, I need to find this. I think there's a wait. Okay, so in the control section, we can add a little wait. Now, 1 second might be a bit too much. So we might be able to make that a bit smaller, maybe a quarter of a second, 0.25 of a second. Let's see how that plays. There we go. So he's now walking towards our mouse pointer, but it's a little bit slower, a little bit more under control. Perfect. And play around with that wait. You can have 1 second, 2 seconds. You know, it probably won't want to be more than 1 second, but you'll probably want to find something that works well for your computer. Now, wouldn't it be great if he also made noises while he was doing this? So we can add in some drum beats. Now, unfortunately, you won't hear the sounds on these recordings because the recording software I'm using doesn't pick up the audio for the drum beats. But in order to do that, you go into the sound section and you can pick up a drum. So we can drop that in there and that will play the drum of type, whichever one you pick, and it'll play 0.25 beats. So when you start your program, then you can hear him move around. You might be able to hear that on the microphone, but he's walking towards. He looks a little bit in slow motion now, but a little bit better than the super fast speed that we had earlier. He looked like the Flash from DC Comics. Okay, so that's the first bit. We can see Felix now moving towards the mouse. But we need to move towards a real mouse and not just my mouse. So now we want another sprite. We need to introduce our mouse. So in the sprite section down at the bottom, we can load a new one. And we're going to find a mouse. So we want to look in, well, this is all of them. So if we go in the animals section, we should be able to find mouse number 1. And these images are loading up slow. If you've downloaded the Scratch software, this probably loads up a lot quicker. So we're going to select the mouse and he should appear shortly. Okay, now you'll see Felix has disappeared from this section down at the bottom. If you hit that little blue arrow icon, it takes you back to show them both, and you can pick between your sprites in order to edit them. Hitting the blue eye will take you in depth in there. So we need to name this mouse. So we're going to call him Herbert. There we go. Herbert the mouse. And just like with Felix, we only want him moving left and right. We don't want him spinning around, I don't think. What else do we want to do here? So we can make Herbert a wee bit smaller because he's quite big for a mouse, really, when you think about it. So we can make him a little bit smaller. So if we click on our costumes tab and we select him there, you see, we can shrink him a little bit. So up in the top bar here, you have options to duplicate, to cut, delete, to grow, and to shrink. So we're going to shrink him. Hopefully. Oh, I need to, I think, do I put it? There we go. So you put it over the picture, click on it, and then drag the shrink thing over that, and you can make him as small as you want. Make him a little bit smaller. Okay, all done. So he's nice and small now. We can turn that off. No, turn it off. Don't want it. Right, there we go. All shrunk. Okay, so now we need to give some commands to Herbert. Now, this is where you see the difference between where your computer code goes, your blocks. So if we look on the scripts for Herbert, there is nothing. Nothing there at all. If we look at the backdrop, there's nothing. If we look on Felix, there's our code. And the reason that code is there is because that's the code that tells Felix to do stuff. Okay, so if we move onto our mouse, Herbert, there's no code. So we need to add code in there to tell him exactly what he needs to do. So we go to events and we start with the green flag, as always. And again, we're going to want him to be on a loop, to continuously do something. So we select our control section, find our forever loop, plug that in there, and then we're going to want Herbert to move towards the mouse. Well, actually, he's going to want to be on the mouse because as we move him around, he's got to stick to the mouse. That's part of the game. So if we go to motion, we should be able to pick go to mouse. Yep. So drop that in our loop. So it's always going to be where the mouse pointer is. But we're always going to want him pointing towards Felix. He needs to keep his eyes on that crafty little cat. Yeah? Don't want to take your eyes off him because then he might be on you like a flash. So, well, literally like the flash if we'd have left that timer as it was. Anyway, so in here we should also have the point towards block. We drop that in our loop and we select Felix rather than the mouse pointer. Remember, when we used that block for Felix, we had it pointing towards the mouse pointer. So you can see that relationship now. Felix is always pointing towards the mouse pointer. Herbert is always at the mouse pointer, and he's always pointing towards Felix. So the two of them are always looking at each other, and one of them follows the mouse pointer, one of them stays on the mouse pointer. So if we run this program now, you should see that I'm effectively dragging Herbert around, and he's always looking at Felix, and Felix is always looking at him and following him. And we can stop that there. I'll reset these guys back a bit. Okay, perfect. So that's Herbert's instructions, or at least the start of them. But we need to make things a little bit more complex because we want this to be a proper game. So let's see what we can do to Herbert. Not Herbert, Felix. Let's see what we can do to Felix to change him to try and catch Herbert, or rather to tell him what to do when he does. So one thing we mentioned in that early video we did, that first video, when we were looking at all the different blocks, is we talked about control, and particularly about the if block. Now the if block's so powerful because this is the statement that allows you to say, if this thing happens, do this thing, which is invaluable. And you'll use it everywhere in any programming language, even one as basic as Scratch, all the way up to something as complex as Java, C#, other more advanced programming languages. So we're going to take that if block and we're going to pick the simple one, which is just if. Drop that in there. And what we want to do is we want to tell Felix, if you touch Herbert, do something. So we need to find the block that's going to allow us to select touching. Now I think that's in sensing. Okay, so we have that initial block there, touching. You see it's got that kind of diamondy shape to it. Actually a hexagon, but kind of stretched out. And we stick that right into that if statement just there. And it has a little drop down arrow and we can click on that and it gives us a few options. We can pick the edge of the screen, we can pick the mouse pointer, or we can pick Herbert. So let's pick Herbert, and now we're saying if Felix is touching Herbert, we're going to do something. So what are we going to do? We're going to have Felix say, caught you. All right, so where do we do that? Well, in looks, we can do messages. So if we pick say, we can drop that into the middle of the if block, just like you would use the forever and put stuff in the middle of there. We're going to do that with the if, and that means that that block will only be run if Felix touches Herbert. Okay, so we're going to change the time. We only want the message to display for a short time, but we do need to change that message to say caught you, and I'll have an exclamation mark on there. Bingo. So now if we run our program, same thing again. Mouse and cat always looking at each other. And now if I let Felix catch him, let's see what happens. Ah, he's got him. Ah, he's got him. Ah, he's got him. Brilliant. So there we go. That is the start of our program now. So going back to Felix's code there. What's next? What's next? Okay. Now, we can do stuff to have interaction between parts of our computer program. So instead of Felix saying something, we want Herbert to do something when he's caught. So we're going to remove the caught you, get rid of that, and we're going to have Felix broadcast. So what this means is he's going to send out a signal to another part of our computer program, and that other part of the computer program is going to receive it and react to it. So in the events section, I think it is, we can pick broadcast. So we're going to stick broadcast in there. But what we need is a particular message. So we're going to broadcast a message that simply called caught. Now, we're going to need Herbert to react to that once he's been caught. Now, imagine this like you're playing TIG or tag in the playground and someone touches you and they say tag, and immediately you have to react to that. So if you've been tagged and someone's broadcast tag to you, you are then the chaser. So rather than being the pursued, you are then the chaser. So you're reacting to the message, and this is exactly what we're doing here. So we take broadcast. We're also going to add in some other stuff here. So as well as broadcasting caught, let's play a sound. Why not? We can play a drum, I think. So let's play a drum in there. What drum should we go for? Ooh, let's pick Vibraslap, which is an interesting name. Never heard of that drum before. Well, let's go with that one. We'll leave it for the 0.25 beats. Why not? We're also going to put a weight in there, I think, because you saw when Felix caught Herbert before, he continued to catch him quite frequently. So if we put a little bit of a weight in there, it'll slow things down nicely, just so it doesn't happen so frequently. So if we run that program now, you're not going to see an awful lot of difference. The one thing you will notice is when he does catch him, the message won't appear. We get the sound, so that's showing that he's being caught, and that nice little Vibraslap drum playing its little, I don't know what you'd call that. So it reminded me of an old program called Wurzel Gummidge. And kids, if you're watching this and you've no idea what that is, ask your parents. They'll know. Scary stuff, Wurzel Gummidge. Terrifying. Right. So now we need to tell Herbert what to do when he receives that message. So if we go back to Herbert, oh, we're on Herbert, switch to him. So you can see Herbert's code here. All he does is stay with our mouse pointer and keep pointing towards Felix. But how about we tell him to do some other stuff? So if we go into events and we say, when I receive, so when he receives that caught message, we're going to do some other stuff. We're going to turn him into a ghost. Now, before we can do that, we need a new costume for Herbert. So if we click in the costumes tab, we'll notice there's only one on Herbert. He's just a mouse. But we'll want to turn him into a ghost. So we're going to load up a new costume. And it's in the fantasy section. I'm going to pick a ghost. Which ghost? Which ghost? I'm going to go for Ghost 2B. I like that one. Looks a bit like Casper. So he's going to turn into this ghost. Now, that's quite a big ghost. Oh no, it's kind of kept it in line. The size. It's not too bad, yeah. So we'll keep him at that size, I think. So we can rename this costume to Dead. Not very nice, but we're going to call it Dead. just so we know what we're referring to. And let's change Herbert's other one to alive. So we've got 2 costumes, alive and dead. Okay, so now we go back to this code and we say when I receive caught, switch costume. So you can see the blocks in the looks section, we have a switch costume to dead. Fantastic. And then we can add in a little wait into that. Again, using waits is quite a nice way to just slow your program down, make sure it's not getting ahead of itself. So we can change that, switch that, and once we've waited, let's make him alive again. And we can keep the game going. So now let's play this. Again, we're all running after. Let's see what happens when he catches him. Bingo! And he changes back. Bingo! And he catches him again. And it gives you a chance to move away and reset. And he catches him. Bingo! Who are you going to call? Well, Felix, quite obviously. Actually, you know what we should do? Maybe we'll do this at another time. We should have Felix turn into a Ghostbuster when Herbert turns into a ghost. And then he only turns back when the Ghostbuster gets... And we're getting ahead of ourselves. Anyway, that's the kind of thing you could do if you wanted to modify this program. So, okay, we have our costumes. But this is a game. And we don't have a score. How can we find out how we're doing if we don't have a score? That's not very good, is it? So, this is where things get a little bit interesting. We're going to create some variables and we're going to have some extra controls in our program. And we're going to do these because these are kind of overarching controls, overarching code that really affect everything. We're going to put them on our backdrop rather than a specific sprite. So if we click on our backdrop on the left hand side here, we can then add some code in here. So again, we're going to use that when green flag clicked, that's starting things off. We want to set our score, but we need a score first. So we're going to go into data, create a new variable called score. And we want to make that available for all sprites, but we only get that option in this area anyway, so that's handy. So going back to our control blocks, we can say, well, not our control blocks, data blocks. We want to set our score. So we're going to set it to 0 at the start of the game, as you would do. Then we're going to loop. So we're going to take that forever block, stick it in here, and we're going to change the score. So if we have on data, if we change our score by 1 in the loop, and then we wait a second, wait 1 second in there, that will mean that Herbert scores 1 point for every second that he doesn't get caught. Well, rather, Herbert will score 1 point every second. The next bit affects what happens when he gets caught. So, if we run this program now, you'll see that the score goes up. You see that score in the top left corner? It's going to go up. When he gets caught, nothing happens at the moment, apart from changing into a ghost. And the score keeps on going. But what we need to have happen is there be a reaction when he gets caught. So, when Herbert receives caught, actually no, when the stage receives caught, not Herbert, remember we'll go back to the stage because this is overarching code. So we're going to select our event. We're going to have when I receive caught, change the score. So we go back to data and we pick change the score. What we're going to have happen is that score is going to keep going up every second, but if Herbert gets caught, we're going to deduct points from the score. And we're going to deduct a big load of points, so 100 points. Okay? So if we run that program now, we can see the score going up, and then boom, he's caught. But what happens then is our score goes negative. That's not very good. We only really want our score to go down to 0. So why is that happening, and what can we do about it? Well, we'll come to that in a moment. Okay. So we have our game. We have our cat chasing our mouse. We have our score going up for as long as Herbert stays away from Felix. And we have something happen when Felix catches Herbert. But as we said, that score goes below 0. So not very good. So one quick thing we can do to change that is when I receive caught, we can, instead of, well, we can say change score by 100, or we can also reset the score maybe to 0. That would be one way of doing it, rather than changing the score by 100. We could put in an if block, which could say if score less than 0, set it to 0. That would be a way of handling it. But the most simple way is that first one. We can say if you get caught, the score goes back to 0. So if we play that, we say, look, you're making your score, and then score goes back to 0, and you start counting again. Now, what you can do with this code is you could modify it. You could put in a high score, so you could keep track of the highest score, and maybe broadcast that when it's finished. So once you get caught, broadcast what the final score was and keep a tally and say who was the best, those kind of things. You can obviously change the speeds, change the characters, backgrounds. There's lots of little things you can do to play with this and customize it and make it your own. But that's lesson 1 of Scratch. That's Felix and Herbert, cat chasing the mouse. So have a go at that yourselves. See how you get on. See if you can reproduce that code. If you've got any questions, you can send them to me in the comments below, or you can send me an email to codeclubmk@gmail.com. Codeclubmk is all one word. Feel free to do that. Obviously, you might need to ask your parents' permission, but go right ahead and do that. I'm also on Twitter. My Twitter ID is @designed4test. So designed4test. And that'll appear at the end of this video too. Obviously, if you hit that subscribe button, you won't miss any more of the lessons. And there's going to be more coming out throughout the summer. So stay tuned for those. And thanks very much. We'll see you next time.